Hi and welcome. We're gonna take a look at the ViewModelDesigner. There's a few updates and also a bit of frustration we have had through email, and it's great that you communicate what you think is strange and so we can fix and do better. Thank you very much for that. So the ViewModel editor looks like this, and the first thing about the styles, here you can actually add your own styles if you have them, but I think there's two sent along default. It's the bubbly and it's the MDriven designer default, and this is only for your own pleasure, what you like. It will remember what you have chosen and show that for all the view models you have in this particular model. So change that to whatever you think is appropriate for you. We have I've done a few other styles. There's not that much difference to them, but we can go with this one for now. It sort of mimics the WinForm preview pretty much, and this is how things would look if it would be rendered by the WinForm's rendering engine that we also have, but we don't really recommend you to use that one because it's old and we don't attend to it as much as the VPF or the turnkey ones. Okay, so a new addition is that the highlighting of the columns here are made a different color so that you see them better, and there's a resizer here that makes it possible to resize placed columns. We call these columns view model columns. We call these the view model, the head of the view model, and these are nestings to the view model. We have done a few other things, as when you click one here, this one is highlighted, the corresponding item is highlighted, so it will be easier for the eye to see what it is that you clicked on. And let's make this a bit smaller so that you see. If you were to have it like this and you selected something out of screen, it will now zoom, or rather pan to the correct item. And this is also true vice versa. So if you have it like this, well, it's hard to see now, I guess. If this were to be scrolled, let's add some things. I'm just gonna copy and paste like that, and then scroll it out of view, and I'm gonna click this one, so then it's scrolled and selected, so it will be easier for you to find it with the eye. Okay, so what is it that happens when we gonna do Control Z here to remove these things? What is it that happens when we move around things? Well, the view model is just a grid. It's a logical grid, and we place things like this. If we look at this, we can see that the column is 1, so this is column 1, and the row is 0. This is row 0. If I were to move it here, it would update to column 2. And then the span, how many columns it would expand. If I change this to 2, it jumps. If I change it to 3 and 4, like that. And I could also grab it by the handle, the resize handle in the bottom here, and change it that way. Then it would go back. So we place a label in front of all the placed widgets, and the label is just defaulted to this, the name. And when we find this, we will try to decamel case what we have in the name. But you could actually override this and set something else, like that. Or you could write that manually, some date. But the fastest way is to just have it like the default, and it will decamel case your name. If you don't want the label at all, you can actually remove this and it won't be rendered. You see, it's now not taking up any space there, so you could have something else there without a collision. But if this one were to have the name and you moved up that one, it wouldn't look very good. It's not actually a collision, but it's crap. So avoid that. Yeah. At the very end here, we have an area which will extend it. If you drop on this, it will extend, but you can't drop outside. So why is the grid the size it is? Well, it takes the max and the min of what you have placed, unless you select the top level, the view model level, and explicitly say that it should be 10 columns and 10 rows. Then it would be that, until something forces it to be even bigger, like this. But these are usually set to 0, and we interpret that as sizing it to what you have placed. Okay. So in this case the label takes up 1 column, but if I would like it to take up more columns, I can do it like that. Now it takes up 2, now it takes up 3. There's really no widget resize thing to set this in the UI. You need to change it here. Okay. We also have some few other things. Show the grid lines I've talked about, and the show tab order. It says in what order the key navigation will try to use, and we can control this by changing the strategy. Now it's display order Y before X, but maybe it should be the other way around. X before Y, or maybe it should be the column design order. So if this one would be at the very bottom, then it would jump around like this. And I know we have some kind of bug here with the arrows denoting how things are connected, but we haven't got around to fix that. It's just the rendering. Okay. Further to this, we have the zoom in and the zoom out and the fit. Nothing strange about that. But this thing, screen size marker, it says 1920 by 1080, and what that control is actually the size of the prototyper. So when we start it, it comes up really big. But if I were to set this, and this is a global setting, so if I set it to 800 by 600 and start the prototyping, it comes up a lot smaller. Okay. So we have this adjusted zoom. It's a variable that will be a value that will be streamed along with the other data of the view model, and we have had use for it when the screens are too big for so to avoid scroll bars showing on the user's monitors. But it's only implemented for VPF really. Okay, and we have the actions tab, which denotes how we can come here, and we can double click it and bring up the actions dialog like that, and we have seen that before. And also if there's a view model action in here, or rather a navigating action, it would show up like a little icon. So when I click this action, view one thing, I can see that it brings up the view model view one thing, but I can just as well jump to it straight here. So this is actually a great way to navigate around your application in design time. And of course you can opt out and opt in the actions as we have talked about before. So whenever you design and make things end up on top of each other, you will get these warnings. The column sum value occupies the same space as some string. And this you should never run like this. You should avoid it. This will also show when you save and the model validation is run as part of the save operation, and it will state that this is a problem. Actually, you should always make sure that this is empty. Never run with things not solved here. It's really not supported. It could be any kind of issue with your model that that would be problematic for the framework to deal with. So when things end up on top of each other, there's actually no super good way to know which one you click. You just have to move them around to see if this is what you want, or maybe that is what you want. The view model editor has been stable for quite a while, which is good. It sort of tells us that it is doing what it should, and we haven't had a lot of need to change it. but we had this idea that we think is truly generic, and it's the ability to tie an action to another widget in the UI. So if you remember, we could of course add an action column which really only is a button like this, and yeah, this might be good to mention here. Whenever we add something, the default position will be the last position you had plus one row. So if I add another thing, it would end up under the one I just placed. So this is practical. So if you're gonna add a lot of things over here, make sure that you change it there first and then add the rest, and they will end up under it like that. Right. But what I was saying was that the action column, my action, that's just a ordinary column with the is action checkbox checked. So if I were to take that away, it would render like a text box, but I want it as an action. And here's a few new things. Of course, when it is an action, you might enter the expression here, and then it's action editor, the EAL language, which is allowed to have side effects. Wouldn't be much of an action if it didn't. But you can also hook it to a existing ViewModel action that you have designed here. So, and that makes it possible for you to navigate from a button, for example, or do framework actions and things that are only available in the actions defined here. Yeah, but what I was speaking about was the ability to tie an action to another placed widget. So a few things we have designed this for. Let's try to, I'm going to check. That was the one that I fixed. So I'm going to add an attribute so that we could show an image, because images is, so I have this image attribute, let's call it image, and make the type a blob, blob, and whenever I have blob, I can set the blob type to help the rendering engine and say it's an image, and that means that I now have a new column to add here. So that's the image, and it ended up here because this was the one I did last, and it just adds it the same height and everything, but I might want it like this, not like that, and maybe like that. So what I really would like to do now is to make this image clickable. That's a common use case. I want the image, but I want it to be able, I want someone to be able to click the image and do something. So, but I have my action, and this is where I can do things. Let's say that my action takes the, well, what should it do? take the sum string attribute and appends an X like that. And here's my image. So let's just run this and see what it does. Doing the play and yeah. And view all things, create a thing, and save it so I have it for later. And if I were to click my action, it would add an X like that. And if I were to pick an image, I guess I could go like that to have an image. And if I were to click this, nothing would happen because it's just an image, right? So that's what is cool with this new feature, is that I could point at the image, or rather point at the action, and on the action row it says rendered by. So here I can say that it's the image that will render my action and not myself. And what happens then if I choose this is that the button shouldn't have a visual representation. It shouldn't be available anymore, and it disappears, and now it's backed by the image instead. So that would mean if I refresh this and bring up the same thing again, the button isn't there, but I can double click the image and things will happen here. So this is the new feature that we have added to today. I've added it to VPF, and I will continue to add it to the turnkey rendering engines as well. So there's this possibility is also implemented for things that have that are static edit boxes, static labels like this, some string, and then I can say that the action that I have here is actually rendered by my attribute on my column called SumString, and then it shows up as a hyperlink thing, and that would be the same as if I do a refresh and navigate back. If I click it, it would execute the action and it added an X, but this one doesn't have the action now. So if I want both, I need to add two actions and say that what column stay back. So but this feature also enables us to do a thing that we have been thinking about for a while. You know, when you have a grid with lots of things, and maybe you want to select a few things of the grid, the standard pattern has been to add another grid with a couple of actions in between showing arrows. I want to pick these, I want to remove these from the picked. But a much more compact way of doing it would be to have a checkbox column here that you just could check to get things. And this rendered by action is actually one way to solve it. So if I save this, I can just set some values here so we see that they are different. And if I were to add a new generic column here and saying that well, actually I need to have something in my model so that I can choose many details. Let's just add another link and call that one picked details, like that. And press Ctrl L to make it squared. Whenever I press Ctrl L, it will remain squared when I move it around. Okay, so just to prove the points, I'm gonna add that's the ViewModel multi-links, and I'm gonna grab this one, pick details. I know it was out of screen, but I think you get it by now. I'm gonna show the attribute 1 and delete that column, and now it collides with things. Move that up and move this here, and like that, maybe like so. And what about a compact way to move this one up by dragging it? Now it's first, and I say call this picked, and now I should get the expression to denote if it is picked or not. So self, and I'm in the context of a detail. Remember the model of detail that is owned by a thing. So I navigate up to thing and say pick details, index of self. If this is bigger than -1, then it actually is picked. So I guess that could be my expression, because if I'm not bigger than -1, it will be false, and I will be and I'm not picked. So that could be the expression, and running that would look like this. And of course it's a read-only expression because it is index off, and it doesn't set anything, change anything in my model. But what I want to do is when I click this, I want it to be selected. So what we can do is to, in the grid, add a new column, and I'm going to say it's prepared for action, so it's an action column. This is rather new. We haven't allowed column actions in the grid before, and we still actually more or less don't, because it's unclear what they should do. But in this case it's clear. We want this column, this action, to be rendered by the picked column. So whenever you click the picked, it should actually just ignore what it is, in this case a checkbox, and just execute the action. So we are still in the context of a detail, and we navigate up to thing, and we see this selected. The picked details. So if picked details index of self is bigger than -1, then So what we're saying, if we already are picked, then we should actually remove ourselves, because we want to toggle this. So when you check it, it should be picked, and when you uncheck it, it should be removed. So when we want to add ourselves to this association, and then we are end if, like that. So having done that, we should refresh. Now when I click, the action is executed, and it will render here as a consequence. And if I check it again, click it again, it will execute the action one more time, and I see that I'm already selected and then unselected. And the checkbox is actually just signaling this state. So this is cool, because that means I don't actually need this grid to solve the whole problem of picking a few things. And of course, saving this and going back and going into it again, it will be correct. And even if I had another way to change which ones are picked, it would be derived to have the correct view here. Pretty cool. So that is what you can do with the new thing called rendered by. An action can be rendered by something else. Okay, thank you for listening.